Welcome to the Catholic Leadership Network podcast, where we connect the wisdom and experience of ministry leaders to the realities of ministry in the trenches. We journey with ministry leaders through all the hidden aspects that help us to become fruitful ministers. Here at the Catholic Leadership Network podcast, we discuss the stuff that no one told you about Catholic ministry and strive to help ministry leaders succeed from the beginning. Our hosts are Chris P. Cabanis, the Director for Missionary Discipleship for the Diocese of Cleveland, and Sarah Jarzembowski, the Director for Marriage and Family Life at St. Elizabeth Ann Seton Parish in Crofton, Maryland. Please show your support for our efforts by clicking like and subscribe and commenting below. And now here are Sarah and Christy. Great stuff. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Catholic Leadership Network podcast. We're here with Dr. Tracey Lamont of the Loyola Institute for Ministry. Dr. Lamont is the director and associate professor there for the Loyola Institute. She is one of my wise women who I go to when I need to run some things past someone, especially when it comes to ministry and formation and how do I get people to move from point A to point B, she's just one of those wise women that has helped me move from point A to point B without even realizing that I was doing it and caring about it, I didn't realize that I wanted to care about it and I needed to care about it. And all of a sudden I was caring about things, and Tracey is that wise woman that helped me move there. So thank you, Tracey, for joining us. We really, really appreciate your wisdom on the podcast today. So welcome. Welcome. You were on the podcast before. You're here in a different capacity though. You're tenured, you're a director this year. You've got some Lilly grants that you brought into the ministry. You're doing all sorts of different projects. Tell us a little bit about what's been going on since the last time you joined us on the podcast.
Oh gosh, probably a ton.
Okay, pick one or two.
I know. So thanks y'all for having me again. So I would say there's probably right now three big things that have emerged in the last year and a half, two. The first was we were invited to apply for a Lilly grant in support of their young adult initiative, and we got that. So that was really huge. So we've been working on that for the last 2-ish years. I can't remember the time. I also was approached by folks in the Air Force to start a certificate in spiritual fitness and resiliency for their religious affairs folks. And that's been really exciting. So that's up and running, like they're taking courses now. That started this spring or fall and through the spring. And that's really like the Air Force is trying and so is the Army, like the armed services are really focusing doing a real pivot in the last 5 years around spiritual fitness. So the whole health of the soldier, they are very on board with the research that's saying that spirituality is biological. And if that's the case, then we need to attend to it. It can't just be your mental health and your physical health, that spiritual health means something. And so then how do they revise the whole chaplain corps around that? And so that's really fascinating. So we're in those conversations about, and also people who are spiritual and not religious. And that's a challenge in some places where, sometimes the chaplains are, they're by Congress endorsed by a religious institution. And so they're, like Catholic or Jewish or Muslim. And, but with more and more people not claiming a religious identity, that calls into question what ministry looks like in these traditional spaces, and what's the role of the religious affairs airmen and specialists in the Army, because from what I understand, at least in the Air Force, they had a different title and they're very much assistants to the chaplains, but with this whole spirituality connotation and spiritual fitness coming up, so even if you don't claim, if you're non-religious, there's still practices of spirituality that can help you build up your fitness and your resiliency. And so that's been real exciting to be in these conversations, because that's a big trend in the country too, so to be kind of on the cutting edge of that has been really just wonderful to learn from people from such a different context from my own. So that's been exciting. And then we were awarded a Lilly grant back in like November, December of 2023 in support of their Thriving Congregations initiative. So I'm working with John Roberto on that. And that is called Becoming a Missionary Synodal Parish. So both of our Lilly grants are grounded in synodality and how to do it. So I'll stop there and you can tell me what thoughts
Wow.
you want me to pull out from all that, because there's a lot in
Woo!
those. Sarah?
I'm so excited about this resiliency and spiritual health. I think that you and I need to have a conversation off the podcast because I'm just like agog about that. We
Yeah.
have some really, I mean, where Paul and I live, we're just like in a hub of military activity just outside the DC area. We have families that move in and out of our parish a lot.
Mhm.
Um, due to military moves.
Mhm.
So I'd love to chat with you about what, as a parish staff
Yeah,
person, I can do to help with that
sure.
spiritual resiliency. When I'm 10 years ago, I was working with Charis Ministries. We were talking about resiliency and how our faith and how Charis and their retreats and the Ignatian retreats could be part of that resiliency.
Mhm.
And we worked with the Archdiocese for the Military Services USA in that aspect. And so this has been something that's kind of come back up in my life, for the past 10 years. It's kind of popped back up. So I just find that fascinating how that kind of keeps coming back. And the spirit kind of keep nudging that forward in my
Yeah.
knowledge there. So we'll talk about that offline a little bit and see what the
Sure.
spirit's really doing there. So wow, you've been doing a lot here with grants. We talked to John Roberto 2 weeks ago, maybe. So yeah, he
Oh, good.
mentioned that Lilly grant and
Yeah.
all the work that he's doing with NCCL and with you and all of that. So yeah, you've been a little bit busy,
A little bit.
little bit.
A little bit. Yeah.
And that's really great. And of course, living in New Orleans, you had Mardi Gras down there. So,
Oh, yeah.
you haven't had time to breathe now, have you?
That's right. That's right. Looking forward to a little rest over Easter.
Hope
So,
so. One of the things we've been talking about on the podcast this season is, looking at um programs and ministries, and there's some things that we see that are like packaged ministries, and our parishes and our ministries and what's in front of us, family formation, faith formation, CCD, religious ed, whatever we're calling it, young adult ministry, and then what the needs are of our parish, and noticing that there's always some disconnect. there's never the there's never really a plug and chug, a pack and play kind of let's do it. How do you know what needs to be tweaked, moved, what's right, what ideologically, where things are? Like, how do we start to know what needs to be moved and how to move it?
well, unpopular answer. You have to know your people first. Like, there's no resource that's going to tell you anything about your
Mm,
people,
mhm,
unless the resource is process based. And I don't see any of those coming out of publishing companies getting vetted. I don't think there's a comprehensive understanding of what education truly could be in our Catholic circles. I think, unfortunately, we're just following the standard driven model in the public sector. And so people are just think resources are standards and objectives and textbooks and things like that. Um, those don't reflect your people unless you do something about them, So the first thing I would always recommend is get to know your students. If you're a catechist, if you're a DRE, a minister, youth, young adult minister, spend some good time growing in fellowship, spend time talking about the questions that people have about faith in their lives, and then start developing and curating resources that link to what they're looking for. And
mhm,
so, and that's hard. Like, so yeah, I've been told I need to teach, 10 classes for confirmation. I don't have time to get to know people. And you got to start pushing back on that, because people are not coming back to the church with that model of education. The young adults that we talked to, they were like, we had what, an hour a week of confirmation prep, and that's all the church had to offer me? No, I'm not going back. Like,
right.
so maybe rethink that. Like, I'm losing a lot of patience with the whole, they have to learn this. I was like, do they? they have to learn all of that, just to get this, it's putting the carrot,
Yeah.
in front of the wagon. And Pope Francis says you can't do that with sacraments. So I'm not really clear on why we're still doing that. I think it's coming out of fear because people are like, oh, if we don't have these catechism classes, people don't come to church and we don't have money in the coffer. And it's like,
Right.
that's not a reason to do anything.
I feel like the opposite is also true though, Tracey. Like you want to reduce confirmation experience down to 10 hours.
Yeah,
That's foolishness. No, it should be.
right.
I mean, mystagogy is a thing, is something that I say, and I have it on a bag and a coffee cup at this point. But that it's ongoing. One of the things that was so exciting to me whenever I entered into formation early in my time was that all of the teachers, professors, and mentor people that were in my life constantly were saying like, and there's so much more. We are only just
The tip of the
touching
iceberg.
the very
Yeah.
teeny top of it. And when we start to get into super requirement mode,
Mhm.
we reduce
I
what
know.
there is to know about anything of God. And that's the beauty. Like this is mystery. And that means we can't solve it, but that it's
Not a multiple
infinite,
choice question.
ongoing. Yeah, exactly. There's so
Yeah.
much to mine here. So let's dig in.
Yeah. And start, and to be more practical about it, because I know there's constraints in what people think. I know that there's pastors that come in and say, the people that are doing the OCIA, RCIA, doing that well, in terms of listening, forming community and all of that, they're coming in and saying like, oh, you got to change this, they got to learn this. But, there's pastors coming in and doing that. And I get that you can't push back on that and also have a job. So there's a real challenge of listening between our clergy and our lay people. And I get that. I mean, I don't have answers other than practice synodality, but there's clergy that don't want to do that. So I can't control that beast. And so I apologize for that. But, you really got to start with the end in mind. What are you looking for? Is it, and I'm not saying, and please don't let that be, oh, they have to know the gifts of the Holy Spirit. That's not the end in mind. The end in mind, I hope to high heaven, is a robust relationship with Christ. Like, I hope that somewhere somebody is thinking that that's the goal of evangelization, is to get people in touch with themselves, God, and others,
Yeah.
And so if that's not your primary goal, maybe consider that, and then from there, how do we get people in touch with Christ? Well, you have to know where they are in their journey. So like I said, you got to spend some time getting to know people and let them know that they matter. The young adults, again, I do a lot of listening session with young adults that were raised in the Catholic Church as teens, going in first communion prep, confirmation prep, all that stuff. And it was, or Catholic school. And some of them had great experiences. The ones that didn't, they were like, I just wish that somebody would have let me, like, first of all, they said, I just didn't think anybody cared what I thought about the faith. So I didn't say anything. And I'm like, well, that's great. How much money did you spend in Catholic school on that? Like that, you thought no one cared, And so there's this disconnect with our young people because they're just talked at, and the last thing you want to do in a parish is put a person in a classroom if they've been in a classroom all day long, all week long, but that's typically what we're still doing. And that's, so the schooling and instructional models got to start changing to be more creation of belonging and fellowship. And from there, people want to learn more. They're like, oh, this is a good experience I'm having of church. What more could I learn? Like it really creates a sense of inquiry. So, and also, what is your view of the human person? So when you're looking at resources, I would say the number one thing you got to ask yourself is, what's the view of the human person behind this resource? Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is, are we falling back constantly into Descartes' whole, you're just a receptacle of information, you're a blank slate? That's the worst thing you could ever do. People are co-creators of knowledge. I don't care how old they are. The studies on how children can learn and also shape their learning through inquiry, I mean, it's phenomenal. And people in religious ed circles are pulling that research in, and they're changing what they're doing, because children have the capacity to be malleable and to wonder and to bring their experience to the curriculum. I don't care how old they are, they have that capacity. They've just never been nurtured to do that. And that's your Montessori methods, Catechesis of the Good Shepherd, but that's Reggio Emilia is like the latest one that's a lot more popular in terms of just leading, that sense of inquiry for students. And, so what is the resource saying about the human person? Does it presume that you're just going to dump information into them? And if that's the case, then that's all you're going to get is information spewed back out. And then they're going to be like, all right, now I'm going to go on to the next topic, like chemistry. And, like, so what's the point of faith? If it's just
Exactly.
a subject that you're being told to memorize a bunch of stuff for. So I'd look for that, um, and then, does the resource get students thinking or talking about their lives? That's the other really big one. I've done some professional development stuff for theology teachers in high schools in the past. And so I've looked at their resources to get a sense of what it is they're doing, like their textbooks, whatever. And I won't name the resource, but the one that a lot of the schools around here have been using. So I just looked at a lesson plan, and like it was like something on like sin and always on pride or something like that, the sin of pride or something. And so the questions that you pose, you read through all these pages, the typical boring lesson plan, and the questions that posed in the end are like, and so what would be an example of pride, or what would blah blah. I was like, can you just change that to be like, can you give me an example from your life?
Yes.
Like, please, if the question is going to make them look it up in the book, don't use it. Like, because they never had to answer. And I shared with them, I said, where in any of these questions, these big questions, are they actually answering as a person of faith? Because they're not. They're just looking it up in the book. So there's a huge disconnect between the way, and that's what's getting approved, so that's where, the powers that be apparently don't want people to think about this for themselves. And I just would say, these are your people. The USCCB can't tell you about the people sitting in your classroom, like, you should
the
be
answers to those questions can get really deep really fast. I mean, kids have a real capacity for depth
Oh yeah.
that I think, now some of them are really smarty pants and will give you a real smarty pants answer, but I take those kids seriously too. And in their smarty pants answer, there's a nugget of truth.
There is.
Right.
Yeah.
And I tend to look for that nugget of truth in there so that those other ones that are ready to give that real solid answer are ready, give that real solid answer and acknowledge that real solid answer. I mean, last night I was talking about child and youth protection with like 8 kids around a table. It was a makeup session and we had 8 kids, and holy wow. I had one kid who was very forthcoming with some information and a story. He's like, do you want me to share? I said, you share what you want to share.
Right.
I said, we are your friends and we are here to listen. And I looked at everybody in the eyes and said, we are respectful and we are listening, trying to encourage that. And we listened, and those kids then listened with such a depth of, and they were all different ages too. So it was very powerful if we give them the opportunity to, they will step into that space.
Yeah.
And
because what they're finding is that there's no one listening to them. We know, we've probably all seen the Springtide stuff, but like the presence of one person in their life that cares for them deeply and listens to them can help with cut their longevity and, or double their longevity. It's pretty rough out there for kids today, like the loneliness, the anxiety, the mental health challenges, and they literally feel they have no one to talk to. Why can't that be our churches? Like why can't churches be a hub of spiritual renewal for people instead of just, here's your class? Like it's programming before people in its finest,
So Tracey, what does a synodal church look like?
Oh gosh, one that's on fire with Christ. But what does that look like? I'm not a big fan of abstracts, but it is, so what I've seen and what we've been doing, because both the grants are really focused on synodality. The newest one, we're up and running. Like I'm going to Chicago next week for the leadership team to talk about how we're going to do it. So that one's really like fresh. But the young adult one, what we've been seeing, it's just, what does a synodal church look like? It looks like a church on mission. It looks like people who deeply care. There's a sense of hospitality and welcome, that your questions are welcomed there, that you can bring questions, about your faith in the church, and you can dabble in the waters of it if you're not sure, and people are going to welcome you back. And that any programming that you have is reflective of the community and the style of your community. So for you, Sarah, you talk a lot about the military. What does it look like when people are super transient, or whatever it is. If you have a real, like, one of the Chicago parishes, real urban, and has a real transient young adult, very business oriented adult, young adult professionals. It's a very different community for them. And people, that's what does it look like to do programming with people that are just different, diverse ways of coming to life and faith. And so your communities really shape what you look like, because you're listening to them. And so, yeah, a synodal church is a one that is just, it's welcoming, it's discerning, it's putting God in the center of all of our relationships with people. And it's, Cynthia Bailey Manns, who went to the synod, she was our speaker for our lecture series a week ago, 2 weeks ago, I can't remember now. But she, I loved it. She challenged me, because I've always talked about synodality as a process. And she said, it's not a process, it's relationships. And I was like, ooh, I got to sit with that one. It was like, it's true. It's very true, and that's what a synodal church would look like, a church that's always listening. People that talked about the synod on synodality in some dioceses, when it first started, they were like, oh, we did a synod in 2015, we're ahead of the game. And I was like, I didn't live here. Does that, like, we've also had a pretty serious racial awakening in the United States. And anybody want to like hear how that's affecting people today, or like, because we just listened and we were done. Like, so it's like always on mission, like always open to where the Spirit is leading us with deep, deep discernment. I love that the conversations in the Spirit guide that I saw on the USCCB website, it pulls up all these like kind of like PowerPoint slides or whatever, like how to do it. It's filled with Saint Ignatius. And I was like, yes. I was like, because who knows discernment better than him? I mean, I'm sure people do, but like all of his processes and his methods of discernment are tried and true, and so it's not just sitting around, deciding. It's prayerfully and it takes time to build this. People are wounded. People need to feel they are safe in their churches. There's a huge disconnect between people in catechesis, parish catechetical leaders, DREs, and parents. And some of those parents are young adults. Like, they seem to like hate each other. I'm like, this is really toxic, like, and this has been going on for years. When I was a youth minister, there was a lot of my young adult volunteers, if they had kids, they were going through first communion prep. And I had one young adult, I mean, he was a volunteer, a young adult volunteer in the church, everything you would ever want. He never went back again after his experience of first communion with his son. And he literally, I think, resented the DRE. And I was like, this is, so I'm not just saying it's happening out there. I've experienced it, like.
Yeah, but to that point, Tracey, like the point is a synodal church is listening to and not behaving in a way that the leader, have all of the answers and know what's best for you, this open slate recipient of information. And so when you come about something like sacrament prep, for instance, and you're bringing a large mixed group of people from a wide range of demographics into your parish together in one space, guess what? They're coming from a wide range of religious experience as well. And some people in the room are equipped to lead the session, and some people have no idea why they're there in the first place. So, balancing that and presenting things, I always found that it was better to err on the side of middle ground and say, some of you already know this and you're familiar. I'm going to be asking you to step up and mentor and lead and engage. The other thing that I think that we're missing too with this, I just want to go for a second back from synodal to the programming, is the capacity of children is effective to their parents. So if we can have an experience where children are engaging with their spirituality and parents witness to that, rather than parents thinking like, oh, this is something they can decide when they're older, parents witness that they have this spiritual capacity and need the formation around what's happening with that. And so then we can bring this in for families to say, actually, this would be lovely for you all to be part of and engage in, and can be a wonderful family experience to engage around concepts of faith. And Sarah, because you've been seeing that happen in your place regularly.
Absolutely. And in fact, I have one young man who's going to be receiving his first communion and his parents are not Catholic.
Mhm.
He's the one that has been pushing this forward from the very beginning. He's the one that's been asking for it. I mean, they're sending him to Catholic school. It's private school, so they're sending him to Catholic school. Catholic school's doing a great job. This is a great Catholic school that we have, you know. I mean, they're doing it right.
Nice.
And you know, I mean, this young man, I think he's got a vocation, but that's another whole story as well, because, you know, he really is just doing a great job with asking the questions. And he's a smarty pants. Like, he's another one of those that, like, you know, says a smart aleck comment and then gives you like one of those goofy little grins, and you're like, ah, you weren't so cute, you know. Like, you're just, you know, look, kid. You know. But you know, he, you know, his parents now, I think, really will start to ask those questions, and they're surrounded by such a wonderful, warm, welcoming group of parents that are able to answer the questions or have the ability to say, you know what, I don't know, but let's ask. Let's find the right way. And I have said to them all from the very beginning, if I don't know the answer, I'm going to find out, you know, and I think that's, I mean, that has just taken such a weight off of my shoulders. And Tracey, I think that's something that you instilled in me through the Loyola courses is, you know, we don't need to know the answers. And that has taken such stress off of me to be able to say that to the other parents is we're continually learning. God is continually revealing himself to us. So we don't have the answers. I don't have the answers. And what is being said this year is going to be different slightly than said last year, because there's a different group of young people in this room. There's a different dynamic of families. Therefore, the Holy Spirit and God is revealing something different and unique in this space. Right. And you taught that to me, and that has been such a relief knowing that it can be different this time. And I don't have to say the exact same thing as last year. And it doesn't have to be the exact same thing as it was the last 3 years.
It never should be.
And it doesn't have to be perfect. And I
But
shouldn't be
that
reading off
scares some
the script.
people. A lot of people want a lot more, like, you know, safety nets of like, oh, I don't want to have to keep recreating the wheel, but I'm sorry, you're going to have to, because your people are going to be different. And so I want people to want to love that idea instead of it being a burden. And I get it. I taught, you know, 4 preps one time when I was in high school, which is a lot. 3 is fine. But when I taught 4, it's like, oh my gosh, I got to do the same. If I do the same thing next year, you know, like but I couldn't do that because my students changed, you know, and when I did kind of like sit on my laurels here and there and be like, all right, I can do the same lesson, you know, I don't have to recreate it. I got real bored. I was like, oh, I got to do something new next year, you know, like, but I know a lot of people want the safety of, you know, and the comfort of keeping things the same. But I really want to encourage people to say, you know, like, your people are different, so you should teach them differently every time, you know, or adjust it or something, not totally different, but adjust it, you know.
Yeah, I think maybe leaving more room for group involvement in what's going on so that you can, I think that, but this is where I just said it the other day at a synodal conversation. I said, I think creativity is born out of formation, because when I'm well formed, then when people go off in a tangent, you can go with them.
Exactly. That's so true. I mean, that's so true. But that's where the rubber's hitting the road for me right now. Cause I'm, you know, we were sharing offline a little bit. I'm just seeing a lot of people get rid of professional ministers because they can't pay them anymore. And I'm like, you can't just let some random volunteer with a good interest do this kind of stuff. Like, you need somebody who knows what they're doing. So we need professional, you know,
we do need professional ministers. Yep.
The movement away from that I'm seeing right now is going to be the end of these churches. Like, you can't, I mean, they're doing it because they're losing money because people didn't come back after the pandemic. And then they're more and more are not coming. And I'm like, this is just going to make it worse. I don't get how you don't see how this is going to make it worse. Like, but good luck. I just hope you don't close. Like, but this is, I can't hear another story of a person who's been in ministry for 20 years getting let go because they're a luxury in their job. And it's like, who's going to do it then?
Or the other one that I'm hearing is like somebody retired or moved out of the area, and so I'm not going to replace that
And they're not being
position.
replaced. Right.
Yeah,
Right.
I just had a conversation with the pastor last week, and then just from he asked me like, oh, what do you think about this or that or the other thing? And I started giving him info, and then he was like, so you want to come here and work on the weekends? And I was like, no, I have a job.
Yeah.
You need to get somebody. I hope that I've made it clear to you that
Right.
this is not something you can just let slide. You
Right.
need a person that's well qualified to do this
Exactly.
work for you.
Exactly. Exactly.
And when you, and no offense to any of the lovely, wonderful people that get voluntold,
Right.
but when you have a person that really does know what they're doing, any, I don't want to use the word program, but any demographic that it will grow because the fruit is there, the fire is there, it becomes a development effort for the parish but you've got to be willing. I literally said, after I talked to this guy, I looked at the gal that I was there with, and I said, buddy's got to sow his tears, because that's what this is. We've got to invest where we think that there isn't going to be fruit, and
Right.
starve a little in order to support
Right.
it.
Right.
It will grow. It will
Because
grow.
change is painful, and it will be
Yes.
hard. You're going to feel like you're failing sometimes,
Yeah.
and that's why you need a person with a good vision and understanding of that. Like we teach leadership courses for a reason, like there's trainings and professional ways of learning how to do all these things. We can't just let it think like, oh, it didn't work. It's like, no, use the resources that you have around you,
Yeah.
and what you were talking about with, it will eventually grow if the fruit is there. That's what we're finding with our parishes for the young adult grant. Like, they invested in young adults. So the young adults are everywhere now. Like, people are like, where are the young adults? I'm like, what have you done? Like, have you centered them in any way beyond just saying like, oh, here, sit on pastoral council and we'll ignore you? Like, have you done anything? And so when these parishes are doing something, young adults can't stay away. So many of them, they're like, oh, you're interested in me? Well, that's great. I never felt, one of our young adults, she said, in the listening session, it was just so powerful, and I repeat it all the time now because it hit me, and she was not wrong. She's like, as a young adult, I can just ghost the church. Nobody would ever know if I came to mass or if I didn't. So you just like, I don't think you should be able to do that. Like, it's not healthy in relationships. Why would it be healthy for the church? And so if you don't know a single person there and no one's even caring to get to know you, why would you go?
Right.
Can't just say go to mass, the Eucharist is the source and summit, when you don't feel any connection to that community at all. Like, that's not what the Eucharist means. Like, Eucharist means communion, and like, you can't just expect that to, like, I don't know, like, somehow, I don't know, like, there has to be
figure itself out. Yeah.
like, there's got to be human formation, not just spiritual and intellectual, and so, so when young adults start coming, like one of the parishes has been really using GroupMe I had no idea GroupMe could do all this stuff anymore. So I'm learning a ton. They like take polls, and they're like, and then they also say like, hey, I'll be at mass. If anybody goes and you feel alone, I'm going on Sunday. And then they go. They're like, oh, thank God, I won't be by myself when I go. Like, it's as simple as that. It's not simple. This is complex, but like, I mean, seriously though, like, it's a simple concept, to feel belonging. Like, I can't understand why we can't get that right as a church.
It's interesting that you say that, Tracey. I was just thinking, like, how do we make that connection? Because, there's all these lines and safety and going over those lines, and how far is too far, and as a minister, where's my line, and where's but GroupMe is such a there, that one. And I just noticed on WhatsApp, there's a whole lot you can do with WhatsApp now.
Cool.
Christy, I was going to talk to you about that with what we might be able to do with our little network here through
nice.
WhatsApp, but yeah, there are different ways that we can do that. We become what we receive at mass. So if we're receiving Eucharist, we become the temple of Christ as we leave.
Christ,
so when we leave and we notice that somebody was not there, we as Christ in those moments can be Christ to somebody and say, you notice you weren't there, is everything okay?
Yep.
But then I'm also like, okay, but what if I just see them at mass and I don't have a way to get connected with them?
Mm-hmm.
What if I only ever see them at mass? How do I then get connected with them? Because there's a lot of people that I'm terrible at names.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just terrible at names. I tell my families that. That's why we wear name tags. I am terrible at names. So I can't even look their name up in the database because I don't know their name.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I recognize their face. I could probably tell you their life story. I could tell you what surgery they had, their family issues, but I couldn't tell you their name enough to be able to look it up in the database to give them a call to see if they're okay.
Yeah. And so, that's, I mean, that's an important thing. I'm terrible with names. I have to write them down immediately, And
Yeah.
so one thing is to keep something on and like handwrite. I'm not talking texting, like I'm, like putting into your phone, which would be easier. But for me, handwriting has always helped because I couldn't remember 175 students every year. Like they had to be in seats. I had to look at their name and call them by name. And it took 3 months for me to remember them, But, like when things, and just thinking practically, take pictures of these people and write it down, like that's one idea. And just be like, hey, listen, I'm terrible with names. And if you swipe up, if you have an iPhone, you can make comments on it, and you can add names that way. That's just one idea, but it is hard. Because I always say, like, you can't just announce from mass you're having a listening session. Now that does kind of work sometimes, like, hey, but you're getting the people that are going. You're not getting the people that went once a month and didn't come this week, and whatever. It does sometimes work, but so there's a two-front approach. One is that when you see these people, say, hey, in 2 months we're going to have a listening session, and then start collecting, if they come, start collecting their information, and that, how to get a hold of them and things like that. And the other approach is go, I hate to use the phrase, but I can't think of anything, low-hanging fruit, the people that are coming, and what we found, especially with young adults, is if they felt, they come to a listening session and, I'm talking like, what do you love about your faith in the church? These are the questions. What is challenging you about your faith and or the church, and what can we do to move forward together? Like I use those three generically and like kind of change them up here and there or whatever. But when young adults have experienced a well facilitated, no fixing, no saving, no judging, like just being able to say what's on their hearts and minds, many of them have said, my friend who left the church would really love this. Can they come next time? And so like then you start getting out to the people that you can't see, or the names that you forgot, or whatever it was, So those are just a few of the thoughts I have on that. I don't know. They're not tried and true. Sometimes they don't work. Sometimes you have a community that's like, nah, they really don't trust you and they're not coming back. I don't know. But like those are some places to start.
Yeah. 2 pages of notes, Tracey. There's always something. There's always something that I'm inspired by. Always something that I'm going to go conquer the world with.
We need these little jolts.
As I have no fixing, no saving, no judging up on my board.
Good. I love that.
I have that. Yeah. I have no shaming up there as well. Shaming, other word that I put in there. I find shaming is something that has crept into my office a little bit.
I'm sorry.
Spiritual shaming is starting to become a thing.
Oh, that's a weapon, my friend.
It is, right? Spiritual shaming. Like, what is that?
Oh, gosh, that's weaponizing spirituality, and I don't like that.
No, we're not doing that. So, but I have that up on my wall, and
Good.
it's a really good reminder. But yeah, so many really, really good ideas. So, we're at time here. So here's the last question. You've had a lot of really great opportunities since the last time we chatted. Anything new that you've learned that you wish you knew when you started in ministry?
In all my listening, with the parishes and before that with National Dialogue, like I've been in so many, had the beauty and honor and sacred privilege of being able to facilitate a lot of listening sessions. And so I just hear from our people of God, I hear from church a lot, and it's sacred ground. And a young adult said, in one of our listening sessions. She said, I gave more time. I paused and I gave more time. Everyone had shared, and I could have gone on to the next question. And I thought, just sit, just sit. Your extroversion can sit with quiet. Just get over yourself, Lamont, you know. And so I did, and more sharing did come out. So it was clearly God saying to me, put the brakes on, lady. You don't have to move on to the next question, you know. And she just openly shared that she just wished that she had someone to talk to her about her vocation. She said, I wish that, you know, all these guys get all this support. They go to seminary and then they're like, oh, maybe it's not for me. She's like, I'll take your place. You know, like, what does it feel like to live in community? I'd like to know that, you know, like, and it just hit me so hard. And I thought, as a woman, as an older woman, maybe twice her age by this point, I don't know, close, I just accepted that I don't get that help. And I thought, oh my God, if I could have told my younger self, you deserve someone to accompany you to lean into your vocation, to find out what that is. And, you know, and again, our callings from God can change over time, or maybe they're just, you know, your vocation is housed differently with different jobs. But I could have used that help, and maybe finding, I don't know, in a young age, you're not always going to advocate for yourself quite yet. Developmentally, you might not be there. And so I can't just say advocate for yourself. That's too easy. And it's not easy. You know, that's an easy cop out answer, I think. But if we could just create more ways of supporting young people's vocations, like that's what I would like to see. Having a period of time with a high school student to say, have you been given thought to what God might call you to? Have you talked about your gifts at all? Like, what do you bring to the world? And how would that world be so much better if those gifts could shine, you know, more or something? Just having some conversations with the people that we see that are young and old, because you go through a crisis of vocation when your kids leave the house and you retire, you know. And so can we just create more mentoring communities to help people think through what God's calling them to, you know? And that's the latest one. When she said that, I was like, I cried. I was like, oh crap. Like, you're right. Like,
I like what you said though, like you had just accepted that wasn't a thing for you as a woman.
Right. And I was like, oh man, she challenged me right there. Like,
yeah.
And I loved it. And I cried. I was like, oh, this is hard, you know? Yeah, it was really powerful. And, you know, this is what can happen if we listen to people. I mean, it can change us. It can help inspire us to do new things. You know, I just, synodality is my jam, man.
And what creativity comes from that?
Oh, I know.
And inspiration and oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the spirit moves in these conversations and it gets in your bones. And it's like, oh, the world feels like a happier place, like a place we can do new things, you know, and it gives you this sense of hope. Yeah.
To see each other and to love each other and to accept where each other are. That's God.
Exactly. I don't know of anything more of God than that, you know, to be able to be a part of someone's story of mercy, of compassion, of radical hospitality, to be a part of that story now. I mean, that's just all Greg Boyle and Ignatian spirituality to me, of like finding God in all things, like finding God in someone's experience and that relationship that is now formed between the two of you by holding that so sacredly, you know, like there's just nothing, I don't know another way of being church other than that. And that's that's my prayer, is that we can really do synodality as a way of being church. It's life-giving and it's transformative. And I don't know what else to say other than that.
This is so exciting. I'm ready to go conquer the world. At least my little portion of it. Yeah, this is so fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, if you ever get the opportunity to sit in a class with Dr. Lamont, I highly encourage it. I always come out with inspiration and hope and joy and just something new to fix my energies on. Dr. Lamont, Tracey, friend, wise woman in my world. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Catholic Leadership Network
Thank you
podcast.
for having me.
So appreciative of your time.
Awesome.
Good luck with all of your grants and projects that you're working on. And please reach out if there's anything we can do at the network here for you in those endeavors. Thank you everyone for joining us here today. Please click like, share, and subscribe and forward this on to all of your friends. The more you click on the links, the better the algorithm works. We've been kind of rocking and rolling these last few weeks. So thank you for doing that. Your support really helps us here at the network and the podcast. So thank you for that. Feel free to pop into the any of the notes and comments and let us know what you'd like to hear for some of our upcoming podcasts and any comments that you have on today's conversation. Thank you so much and have a great day. We'll see you soon. Bye.
Oh, good to be with you.
Thank you for joining today's podcast. Please click the like and subscribe. And if you find this important to the conversations you're having in your local ministry, please share and join the conversation in the comments below. Thank you, and we'll see you next time on the Catholic Leadership Network podcast.